May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm son of Israel Abelin Tobiah Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Israel Ethan Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you sons and daughters of Israel now entering the sanctuary. I now present to you one of the sons of Israel, Leviticus Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. My title today is War No More. Our time of testing is coming to an end. It has been 6,020 years since man has been on earth. The number 6020 in Strong's Greek lexicon putting to the proof. 6020 ties into 1383. Remember that 1383 was the volcano with Pastor's face in the volcano cloud beginning to be active. Remember that it was 33 days before the house of Yahweh was established. In 1383, Dokimon. And Dokimon means putting someone or something to the test whether it is worthy to be approved. What 1383 is showing us is Yahweh is testing us to see if we are fit for Yahweh's kingdom. So if we want to be a Dokimon, we need to put away the Pokemons. Remember in Exodus 20 verse 20, it's on page 61, Exodus 20 verse 20, and it says, Moshe said to the people, "Do not fear, for Yahweh has come to test and prove you, so that the reverence for Yahweh will be with you, so that you do not commit sin." We need to stop playing around, playing these violent video games, playing violent videos, reading violent books that all teach you war and fighting. Yahweh called us from out of this evil raging war. We need to put away all Satan's evil influences. In the 6th book of Yisrayl, chapter 21 and verse 8, it says, you really need to be getting away from the entertainment that Satan is providing. It's a love for the world. I'm serious about destroying your television sets. If you got a child in the house that likes to watch television, try to get the child on other things. But if you've got the temptation in front of him, or you're sitting there watching television and telling your child, go study, it's not going to work. You need to be studying with him, or you need to be programming his studying and have a part in it, and letting him know that you are interested in him or her and in their lives. You should have a love for the house of Yahweh and the book of Yahweh. You should not have the love for Satan's entertainment. In the 7th book of Yisrael, chapter 21 and verse 88, it says, the judgment of Yahweh, you should have already made up your mind. You should have already set your mind on this. You know there's no reason why Yahweh should. He shouldn't keep giving you a date and say, well, give him a few more days and maybe he'll wake up. Inspire him with this or that. Of course, most of the inspiration can't come to an unbeliever, because they've got their mind on video games and they rob their time with Yahweh and keep them from ever getting a message from him in any way. So whenever you watch those violent video games and those violent movies, you're robbing your time with Yahweh, and there's no way, unless you can repent, there's no time that you're not going to get back any time from Yahweh. And with that, if you all please stand.
If you all remain standing, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you a great son of Yisrael, Abel, Deacon White Buffalo Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. Today my title is, What About Pearls, Shells, Hair, Ivory, and Feathers? Many people wonder whether we can use the feathers of unclean birds, or the pearls from the unclean sea oyster, and the ivory from the unclean elephant. If you would turn to Leviticus 11, and let's look at verse 8. It says, their meat you shall not eat, and their carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. In verse 11, it says, and they will be an abomination to you. You must not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination. In verse 25, it says, whoever picks up one of their carcasses must wash his clothes and be unclean until sunset. In verse 28, it says, whoever picks up their carcasses shall wash his clothes and be unclean till sunset. They are unclean to you. In verse 39, on the next page, it says, if an animal you are allowed to eat dies, he who touches its carcass shall be unclean until sunset. In verse 40, it says, anyone who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until sunset. He also who carries its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until sunset. In verse 47, it says, you must distinguish between the clean and the unclean, between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten. In all those scriptures, it says that you must not eat their flesh, nor touch their carcasses. Word number 5308 in the Hebrew Dictionary of Strong Exhaustive Concordance is the word carcass and means a dead body. The word carcass means a dead body. It is the dead body of the animal which contains the blood and the flesh that we are commanded not to touch. The feathers, the shells, the pearls, the hair, and the ivory do not contain blood and do not sustain life. And the last sermon I gave was on not eating the blood and the koshering rules, and that's the whole purpose of this. Parasites are creatures that live on or in the body of another. They are found in the blood of all animals on the earth at this time. The blood of all creatures contains its life. If the blood is drained, then so is its life. Parasites can be very harmful to organisms and can be transferred by ingestion or touch. That's why in the scriptures it says, anyone who eats of its carcass shall wash its clothes, and who also carries his carcass shall also wash his clothes, and they will be unclean until sunset. Parasites can cause diseases which may lead to death. This is why it is very important that you do not touch the carcass, the dead body of an animal, because it can contaminate you. Feathers, hair, shells, pearls, and ivory do not hold blood and do not have life. They do not hold blood and they do not have life. Therefore, the feathers of birds can be used, the shells can be collected, pearls can be worn, and ivory can be treasured. Okay, and if you look in Kings, you'll notice that King Solomon had an ivory throne. Okay, so these things are not unclean to have. If you look in Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 4, and let's look at verse 24. It says, "For Yahweh your Father is a consuming fire, and a zealous heavenly Father, and is provoked by any God." Okay, so when we touch these things, and when we make ourselves unclean, we are cut off from Yahweh, and that is sin. So remember these things, okay, and do not touch the body of an unclean animal, because the body of the animal is its carcass, and the blood contains its life. Well, with that, I'll turn over to the next speaker, the great God, Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. All right, we're going to We're going to get right into it. How many days left till Day of Atonement? 42. 42. 7 times 6. Should be very excited about that. Okay. Have a news flash for us. News flash. This is one of Pastor's latest proofreading / news releases. 4,200 religions agree on bringing war, nuclear war. And now I want you to hear just a couple of excerpts from this first page here. And I'm going to tell you, you need to read this. You're going to be really excited when you read this one. It's really awesome. It says, this prophecy concerns the fourth beast of Daniel 7 and all of the 4,200 religions that have become part of their activities to make continual war, as Cain, the first pope, did. Remember All Saints' Day? The so-called saints were supposedly deified as Satan conjured up in the minds of the religions spoken of in Revelation 17, 1 through 5, and as she has taught the gullible. Remember, people are very gullible. You know, I think P.T. Barnum said there was a sucker born every minute. Okay? It says that is, they were made gods for the people to worship. They were made for people to address their prayers, hoping to get an answer from some God rather than Yahweh. Halloween now, called All Saints' Day, is celebrated by the same 4,200 religions to make making money. Notice the following scripture, he's talking about the Vatican means the divining serpent. And he says that the houses of the gods lie and will continue to do so until the 1 hour burning that I will show you, as did the God worshippers in the days of Noah. And that's just some of the great highlights of that first page. Now, where is he getting this 4,200 religions? Well, here's from Wikipedia, a list of religions. And it says, according to some estimates, there are roughly 4,200 religions in the world today as of 2016. Now, this is very significant. Remember that number 42 and 4,200. And by the way, did everyone know this morning? There's an event taking place. This is from yesterday, August 25th, which was the date Pastor saw that donkey. Remember the donkey vision? 5th anniversary. NASA's Juno to soar closest to Jupiter this Saturday, which is today. It already occurred this morning at these times, and I'm going to just give you a rough idea of what those times mean, but notice it says that this Saturday at 5:51 Pacific, 8:51 Eastern, 12:51 UTC, NASA's Juno spacecraft is going to get to the closest that it's ever been, with actual instruments they're going to be able to use to get, look in those clouds. And notice, it's going to be about 4,200 kilometers. 4,200 kilometers. Pastor didn't write this. The pastor wrote this quite a while ago. And today, lo and behold, 4,200 miles above Jupiter, which, as we should know, represents Zeus. Let's look at 4,200 and get an idea of what that means. This is Satan's race, Satan's course. It means a source of gain. A source of gain. And the only place that it's used, House of Yahweh, is in 1 Timothy 6:5. Where it says, and let's go over there right now and read it real quick. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. Quickly. 1 Timothy 6. And we're going to look at verse 5, because that's what it's quoting. 1 Timothy 6:5. It says, and perverse disputations by men of corrupt minds, destitute of truth. What is the truth? It's the 613 laws. It means they're destitute of the 10 commandments. They're destitute of the 613 laws, imagining that holiness is a way of making financial gain. From such withdraw yourself. So who would that be? Who's that telling you to come out from? Are all the religions teaching the 613 laws? No, they're not. It's telling you to get away from them, turn from them, come to the house of Yahweh. Now turn over real quick to Isaiah 44. Isaiah 44. And we're going to read verse 10 on page 558. It says, "Who has formed a god or cast a graven image without intending to make a profit?" You know anybody that has? Not according to Yahweh, none of them. All of them are intending to make profit. Now I want to show you Acts. Let's go to Acts chapter 19 real quick. Acts chapter 19. Acts 19. Found on page 861. And we're going to look at 19 verse 25. Now, these men in this town, they were making silver shrines to the goddess Isis or Artemis or Diana. Call her what you will. It's the same person. Or Circe. Okay? They were making these shrines. In verse 25, he says, he called them together with the workmen of similar occupation and said, "Men, you know that by this craft we have gained our wealth." Now you see and hear that not only at Ephesus, which was in Turkey, by the way, modern-day Turkey, but over almost all of Asia, this Shaul has convinced people to believe his teaching and turned away many people, saying that gods that are made with hands are not powerful at all. So there's a danger not only of this trade of ours falling into disrepute, but also the temple of the great goddess Isis, or Artemis, or Diana, or Circe, whatever you'd like to call her, Satan, will become despised, and her magnificence will be destroyed, whom all Asia in the world worships. Okay? The whole world worships this. This word craft in verse 25, I want to show you the meaning. The word craft, it's 2039, and it means profit or craft or gain or work, endeavor. It comes from 2041. 2041 means one who works for hire, one who does, a worker or a perpetrator. And it's from 2041. And the word I want you to key on in here is enterprise. That which one undertakes to do, an enterprise or an undertaking. Now, what is an enterprise? Right here. It's an organization, especially a business, or a difficult and important plan, one that will earn money. And one that will earn money. So where do we get the word church from? These 4,200 preachers. Well, remember, pastors taught us, it says, this is the origin of the word church. It says the English word church came into use in the Middle Ages sometime before the 12th century, properly translated ecclesia, and it's supposed to say congregation is what it's supposed to say. And it says, and as we mentioned, he used the word church only twice in Acts 14:13 and Acts 19:37, which refer to buildings connected to idol worship. So wherever you see the word church, it's talking about where Circe was worshipped, idol worship. Now I want you to notice this. Now I want you to think enterprise, okay? It says in Scotland, Circe was called Kirk. Kirk. K-I-R-K. Kirk. Is it ringing a bell yet? Kirk, and in Germany, Kirche. In England, the word is Circe, the C having a K sound. But according to Brown's book, Kirk or Circe was also the name of a goddess. Circe was the daughter of the sun god who was famous for taming wild animals for her circus. But get ready for this. Circe is pictured holding a golden cup in her hand mixed with wine and drugs by which she corrupted the kings of the world. Does that sound familiar? Circe, also it shows here in Wikipedia, she's a sorceress, an enchantress or sorceress, a goddess of magic. And also shows here in the bottom here, it says, she also laced with one of her magical potions and drunk from an enchanted cup. Thus so she turned them all into swine with her magic wand or staff after they gorged themselves, after they ate like pigs, I guess. Now remember I showed you last week that word sorceries meant in gematria is 666. And by the way, this week also, speaking of 666 in the year of 666, you see the math right there. They are telling us that they've discovered 216 habitable planets in the Goldilocks zone thus far. Very significant number. Okay, so let's look at this. Everybody remember, well, hopefully you're kind of getting it out of your head. There was a series called Star Trek on television, and the name of the starship was the USS Enterprise. Notice, it was produced from September 1966. Remember, there's 66 again. 50 years ago, 1966 means Hallel. That's all you need to see there. Here's the name of the starship, Enterprise, USS Enterprise. In gematria, the USS Enterprise is 854 in Hebrew gematria. In the Vatican is 854 in Hebrew gematria. The big Enterprise, the starship. Notice here this headline here, Planned Parenthood, one of our major opponents, a profitable Vatican enterprise. Or how about this one from just a month ago? Second Vatican Conference on Impact Investing. And it talks in here about how we can, it says participants, it says, participants will engage with business, finance, academic, and social enterprise leaders to learn how to make social enterprises attractive to impact investors. Yes, the Vatican is big on enterprise, right? As a matter of fact, on the back of your money, on the dollar bill, it says this right here, Annuit Coeptus, God favors our enterprise. This dollar sign that we see all the time, it tells us that it's the, it says that it's a symbol for the goddess Isis. Isis, huh? Ching ching. Speaking of money and churches, aren't churches called denominations? It says a religious group whose beliefs differ in some ways from other groups in the same religion. It's also a unit of value, especially of money. Wow, that's a coincidence, I think. Hey, by the way, I was looking up those numbers and I saw the word kryptonite, that Superman used to use, was also 854. And 2 seconds later, this pops up on the news. Hungarian politician suggests hanging pigs' heads along border to deter Muslim refugees. And inside the article, it says right here that, they're thinking this guy's behavior is really bizarre for telling people to do that. It says it's very strange and bizarre thing to come out of the mouth of an MEP, especially one who was once a respected historian. It's as if he thinks pork is some kind of kryptonite against Muslims. On the Star Trek series, here was the first captain of the Starship Enterprise in the actual pilot of the program. His name was Christopher Pike. And he did the first pilot, but they didn't like the pilot, so they did a second pilot, which was unheard of in television. And that's when the other captain came up. But his name was Pike. And there's a reason for that. Here's Albert Pike, the leader of the Freemasons, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. By the way, he's also a Confederate military officer with an outdoor statue in Washington, D.C., and he's the only one they didn't come against when they wanted to rip down all those Confederate things. They wanted to leave Albert Pike up. Now, the second the real captain that everybody knows, here he is, James T. Kirk. Kirk, remember Cersei in the Enterprise. Notice his middle name in the story is Tiberius. Remember Tiberius Caesar? Wow, what a name for a comic or an actor, right? He was the commander of the USS Enterprise, and here's his gematria, 323. Captain Kirk, 323. By the way, that would also be the gematria of Lucifer, 323. It would also be the gematria of Catholicism, 323. You getting it? Numbers don't lie. And Yahweh doesn't lie. Beam me up, Scotty. Beam me up, Scotty. Remember Scottish rite of Freemasonry? Beam me up, Scotty. Here's Scotty, one of the officers on board the Starship Enterprise. And then you had Mr. Spock. You know, he used to make that V sign with his fingers. Probably stood for Vatican. But here's what he said. Leonard Nimoy first saw what became the Vulcan salute, and he said it meant long live and prosper. And he learned it in a Jewish synagogue in service in Boston, and it was a childhood memory. He goes on to say, the Shekinah was the name of the prayer he participated in as a boy that inspired the salute. The prayer, meant to bless the congregation, is named after the feminine aspect of God. Quote, they get their talits over their heads and they start chanting. Nimoy says in this 2013 interview, and my father said to me, don't look. At first he obliged, but what I could hear intrigued me. I thought something major is happening here. So I peeked, and I saw them with their hands stuck out from beneath the talit like this, and he showed the V sign. Nimoy said, showing the V with both his hands, he said, I had no idea what was going on, but the sound of it looked as if it was magical. He says, and people don't realize when they're using this sign that they're blessing each other with this. Now, he was a Vulcan. He was half human, half Vulcan. In case you don't know who Vulcan is, it's a Roman god of fire and volcanoes. There you go. Associated with Jupiter. The father was Jupiter. Juno was the mother. Here's the Vulcanol at the Vatican. It's called the Vulcanol right here. It's on one of the 17 the 7 hills of Rome. And it's the foundation of the Roman state, it actually says, this Vulcanol. Now, isn't that interesting? You know? So, oh, by the way, I got to show you this. The Vatican, they just had a thing with the creation of care, you know, this climate change thing where they were flashing pictures on the wall of the Vatican. And I just want to show you who was helping them, if I can find it here. It showed you that the Gene Roddenberry Foundation was also one of the ones helping. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Right here. Here's the coalition partners with the Vatican. Notice one of them is called Vulcan. They're the ones that actually made it. And down here, the Roddenberry Foundation. Gene Roddenberry was the creator of Star Trek. Hey, so they're still all in the Enterprise. Pretty popular still, huh? Captain Kirk is still in charge. Cersei, and they're all making a bunch of money, okay? Now look at this. Now let's talk about our race in my closing moments here. Here's the Hebrew 4200. I showed you 4200 in the Greek. And it means garners. And the only place in Scripture that you'll find it is in Psalm 144. 144. Remember the 144,000? And it means to gather in a garnery, and there's the only place you find it right there. Let our garners be full. Turn over to Psalm 144 real quick. Psalm 144. Psalm 144. In verse 13 is where it's used. It says, it's on page 493, so our garners may be full, supplying all kinds of provisions, so our sheep may bring forth thousands and 10,000s in our fields. And a garner means to gather or deposit in or as if in a granary or other storage place, to gather, collect, or hoard. It's a storehouse. It's like a barn, like Yeshua said, bring the wheat into my barn. That's a garner. It's a storehouse. Now, I want you to look at verse 9. Psalm 144. Remember the 144,000. It says, we will sing a new song to you, O Yahweh, on a harp of 10 strings. Hey, by the way, can you play the clip, please, from last week's sermon? Please play that clip. Listen closely.
Do you ever wonder why you couldn't put up a Ten Commandment sign in the courthouse or a school? Why do the churches not put it in their front yard? Why do the churches not put it in their front yard? Do you ever think about that? Now, they're supposed to be free. They want to go to the courthouse and put it there, but they don't dare post it in front of their church. Why? But they don't dare post it in front of their church. Why? Who's controlling that?
Notice, in verse 9, we will sing a new song to you, O Yahweh, on a harp of 10 strings. If you remember in Revelation chapter 15, the harpers harping with their harps was speaking of the laws of Yahweh. So on a harp of 10 strings, like the 10 Commandments, I want to show you that in Gematria, that verse right there. The great Kahan got up here a couple weeks ago and gave us some dates. One was 830, I talked about that last week. One was 929. You see that? 929-7. That 7 means complete. September is also the 7th month. 929 in Gematria, we will sing a new song to you, that whole verse. But lo and behold, turn over to Revelation 14, verse 2, where this is also spoken of. Revelation 14:2, I'm almost done. In verse 2 it says, and I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters and like the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the harpers harping with their harps. Now, 14:2 in King James, it just adds a couple words, but it basically says the same. It says, I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder, and I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. Well, lo and behold, when you put that one in Gematria, it's the same number. 929. Do you think we're getting ready to hear a new song being sung? The laws of Yahweh will prevail, okay? They will prevail. And for my last deal here, September 29th in Gematria is 2016. All right? Now, you can think that's a coincidence. And remember, the great Kahan brought out that 929 meant a dumb beast. A dumb beast, a muted beast won't be prevailing anymore. The laws of Yahweh will prevail. But it also meant to test, a time of testing. Torment, to torture, a time of testing. Are we getting ready? Because it's going to count now. Are you all ready? Because we're entering into a new phase. We're getting ready to enter into a new phase, so put your phasers on, don't put them on stun. Get your books out, lock them in these books, read this literature, get ready, because it's going to count now. We've been taught. We need to do what we've been taught. Okay? We need to do what we've been taught, all of us. Are we going to do it? Are we going to pass the test? Well, it's been a blessing talking to you. And just by the way, I had to show one other thing because I want to show you how people really understand this. You see, this is somebody made a Starship Enterprise out of a dollar bill. Okay? Yes, so be ready, everyone. Yahweh bless you. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan, Ilya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Everyone may be seated. Now, of course, going along with what the great Kahan was speaking about in this world falling apart around us, and it seems as though that's been taking place for years, but there's not much left holding on to what is been established by this beastly system. It's crumbling. And of course, in Florida, we start off with, but pay close attention to this too. They're talking about the Zika virus that's spreading in Florida, around Miami. So now they're spraying chemicals to kill the mosquitoes, but they're reporting that the chemicals they're spraying may be more deadly than the Zika virus itself. So think about that, and you wonder why there's not people moving out of Miami right now. I think I'd pack my stuff and leave and come to Abelin if I was any of them. But think about that. Dumping poison, and studies have shown that it affects the child's behavior. That's what it affects, these chemicals they're dumping. In fact, in Puerto Rico, if you pay attention, they're protesting it. They'd rather have Zika than the chemical they're dumping. So that shows a lot. And then the EpiPen. If you have allergic reactions, the EpiPen is something that if you're a child, your parents use to, if you're allergic to nuts or so forth, you eat something, they inject you with this pen, and that's supposed to calm that allergic reaction you're having. Of course, the medication was like $80-something, but now it's almost $600. And they say the cost of the medication that's in the EpiPen costs less than $1. So think about what society's doing. Think about what these pharmaceutical companies are doing and how much there's truly no love shown. It's all for the gain of money. And then Italy this last week, they had an earthquake. Of course, it was shaking Rome was the headline. 6.2 shakes Rome. And write this down for your notes. This is something you should remember. 6.2 or 62. The Hebrew number 62, look this up for yourselves. The Hebrew number 62, of course, comes from words 58 and 1004. The word 58 is Abel. Word 1004 is Bayit, which means house. The house of Abel is shaking up Rome. So, but remember those things. Those are very neat. As soon as I seen 62, I remember mentioning that, Pastor mentioning that, and talking about the house of Israel, the seed of Israel is going to do these things. But also with this earthquake, watch, Italy promises these people very quickly that they're going to give them $50 million to rebuild, but Italy's in debt and can't even pay their own bills right now. So that's one promise they'll never keep. Of many promises they've made, they'll never keep. And the euro is crumbling also. That's who would bail Italy out. And then, of course, in California, there's wildfires. Think about these natural disasters. As they say, natural disasters taking place. It's natural, but it's not original. Remember the microbes. And then flooding down in Louisiana, of course, they're trying to deal with it, but they can't deal very well with it because it won't stop raining. And listen to what they say about the military. The military said they'll stay as long as there's supplies, and then they're leaving. So think about that. Think about this, what's being done to solve these problems and what's being done to tell people things that really aren't going to come to pass. And then tornadoes in Indiana this week. Watch, there's one Starbucks coffee store. It is demolished. But while you're seeing this, think about the energy that's created by the things in the atmosphere to do such things. To pick up cars, to put 2x4s through trees. Think of the energy that it takes to do that. And then this week, Syria, chemical attacks taking place. Russia, United States are arguing over who's at fault. Makes you wonder if there's a chemical attack going on in Florida right now also with the dumping of this poison. But these chemical attacks, of course, they're destroying the people. Also, heroin overdose. They're now lacing heroin, which, remember, that's an opioid. Most people that are addicted to heroin now was from painkillers, and it all comes from the same source. But now they're lacing it with elephant tranquilizer. And there was, in West Virginia alone, within 4 hours, 27 people overdosed and died. But once again, they're wanting this stronger drug. They're trying to escape the reality, this misery that they're living in. Then Iran, of course, they don't like sanctions, so now they're developing all their trades in euros. Remember, they signed a pact with Italy not long ago with oil and gas, but now they're dealing with South Korea in euros, and they're dealing in more in euros. That makes it where if you're not trading in euros, you can't shut them down. So the United States can't shut them down when they're dealing in euros. And then pastors brought about the drought. He spoke about Kenya last week with the drought and the food shortage. In Chad, they're reporting 500,000 children could begin to die and are dying at this present time by the end of the year in Chad because of drought and malnutrition, this lack of food, this food shortage. And then there's an article that shows the children and what's being done with the children, how they're being torn apart, how they're suffering. They're being thrown around like rag dolls, and watch, even the people reporting the news could not report it without crying. Even the reporters were breaking down. And then in Germany is asking their citizens, stockpile food and water. Stockpile food and water. Prepare yourselves. Well, prepare yourselves for what? Well, something's coming. They know it's coming. And then Turkey, there was a report this last week of a young man. It was last Sabbath. A young man goes in and blows himself up in a wedding. They're saying the boy was anywhere from 12 to 14 years old. Now, of course, he would only do what he was trained to do, but think about the hatred that has to go into strapping something on a 14-year-old boy or a 12-year-old boy, sending them in and blowing them up. Well, how much hatred is it to dump chemicals that affect the neurological mind concept and decision-making of children? It's all the same. And then, of course, it closes out with the golden object once again that's hovering, that NASA doesn't know what it is, but pay close attention. At this time, if we could go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news today, some are digging out while others are bailing out. Flooding, earthquakes, and fires in different parts of the world. We'll have those stories along with a recent batch of heroin with a very nasty ingredient, of course, leading to the overdosing. And countries are beginning to warn their people that they need to start stockpiling food and water. It makes you wonder, Katan, if they're getting ready for war or some major catastrophe.
Yes, we'll see.
Well, the school year has begun and fall is just around the corner, and the cases of Zika in South Florida continue to multiply. There have been 7 new travel-related cases of Zika reported recently, and the number of locally transmitted cases being spread by Florida mosquitoes has now reached 37. Yet another concern, the state is investigating a possible third active transmission zone.
That's right. 9 of the confirmed locally transmitted cases involve people who were not bitten by mosquitoes in the 2 previously identified zones. Authorities are looking at the popular Brickell neighborhood just south of Miami's downtown as a potential third Zika zone. Brickell's skyline is densely packed with condos, skyscrapers, restaurants, as well as shops and a convention center. It is considered the city's financial district.
The artsy Wynwood district, known for its brightly painted walls and buildings north of downtown Miami, was the first identified Zika zone. Now, Florida has been able to clear the threat from 3 small pockets within that square mile, and there have not been any new infections there in weeks. But on August 19th, the state announced Miami Beach as the second active transmission zone. Now, this 20-block stretch includes tourist attractions like world-famous South Beach hotels, restaurants, and nightclubs. At Catan, just to give you an idea, in 2015, 15 million tourists spent about $24 billion there.
Wow. Well, due to increasing risk, the CDC is cautioning all pregnant women to avoid the entire Miami-Dade County for the duration of their pregnancies. Schools, however, did welcome back students, including 9 schools situated inside the 2 Zika zones. August temperatures in Miami, while hot, didn't deter students, school children, from wearing long sleeves, long pants, and jackets, not to mention plenty of mosquito spray.
I bet. Well, on opening day, Florida's Governor Rick Scott visited one of the schools in the transmission zone. He called on Congress for help, saying, "This is an international issue. It's not just a Florida issue. We're at the tip of the spear because of our location, because of the number of people that travel to our state."
That's right. But Democrats and Republicans have not yet come to an agreement on the final price tag for the Zika bill, so Congress hasn't given the president anything to sign. Well, regardless, the public is being told they are the front line of defense for the war on Zika and strongly encourage people to remove standing water from around their homes, which is a breeding ground for mosquitoes.
Now, Zika is also being fought from the air. Health authorities have been spraying pesticides from airplanes to kill mosquitoes. But there's concern that the chemical being sprayed may be equally as harmful to unborn babies. Naled is the chemical that's raising questions and even protests in some places. But what exactly is it? Well, essentially it's a neurotoxin which can cause neurodevelopmental issues, particularly in unborn children.
Oh, that's scary. The European Union has banned the use of the insecticide, and in Puerto Rico, where Zika has been rampant, people have demonstrated against Naled, and in fact, San Juan's mayor filed a lawsuit against the Centers for Disease Control to prevent spraying there. The lawsuit claims there have been recent findings linking the presence of organophosphates and behavior problems in babies whose mothers were exposed to this type of chemical during their pregnancy.
However, the CDC and the Environmental Protection Agency maintain that Naled is safe and the best option for killing mosquitoes. Now, the CDC points out the decades-long use of Naled in the United States, and they explain that the concentration being used is about 2 tablespoons of chemical over an area roughly the size of a football field. The CDC has said, quote, "This small amount does not pose a health risk to people."
Well, experts point out there are dozens of studies showing when pregnant women are exposed to Naled, their children are more likely to develop behavior problems. And Jeff, either way you look at it, it sounds like a risky situation. Birth defects caused by Zika or behavioral problems caused by Naled.
Well, this next story has many people outraged. It's a life-saving drug for those with potentially deadly allergies. 43 million Americans keep an EpiPen close at hand in case of an allergic reaction. So what's the problem? Well, the price for an EpiPen 2-pack has gone from $100 in 2008 up to $600 today. Wow. And to make matters worse, Catan, the pens must be replaced after a year.
Well, that's a lot of money. Well, because of the price hike, Congress is asking for the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to investigate. Senator Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota, told NBC News, "I consider it gouging because what happened here is they now control, by some estimates, 85% of this market."
Wow, so they can bring that price up and they know they got it.
That's right.
Well, Mylan Pharmaceuticals is the maker of the EpiPen. They also commented to NBC News telling them the price change, quote, better reflects important product features and the value the product provides. Well, Mylan offers coupons to its customers who have high insurance deductibles, which don't cover the price of the drug.
But, Jeff, the company won't give a comment, of course, when it comes to executive compensation. With 400% rise in EpiPen prices, top executives at Mylan received a 600% jump. That's right, 600% jump in their compensation.
Well, there is, however, a cheaper alternative. Dr. John Torres, NBC News medical contributor, said, "The medicine itself is not the expensive part. It's cheap. It's the auto-injector part of the EpiPen that's expensive." And he said you can learn to do it yourself with a syringe, but you have to know how to do it correctly.
Yeah, so basically people are paying for that convenience of
That's
the
right.
injection. Well, central Italy is digging out once again. This time, the devastation was caused by a 6.2 magnitude earthquake. The death toll stands at 267 as rescuers continue to search for any survivors. Italy's Civil Protection Department says nearly 400 other people remain in hospital, with around 40 said to be in critical condition.
Now, the quake's epicenter was 6.2 miles under the central Apennines Mountains, which were formed by colliding tectonic plates along geological fault lines. Italy is also highly prone to damage due to the age and the fragility of its historic buildings.
This year, nothing new for Italy. Within the past 10 years, 2 other earthquakes at or above a magnitude 6 have struck the region. In 2012, a magnitude 6.1 earthquake in northern Italy killed 7. In 2009, a magnitude 6.3 earthquake in central Italy killed 295 and caused $2.5 billion in damages.
Well, so far, at least one powerful aftershock, along with more than 1,000 smaller shocks, have struck the region, hindering rescue efforts. Some key roads are still impassable, and survivors are having to set up makeshift camps to survive. Now, Italy's government has promised more than $50 million to help rebuild, but despite the aid, there are concerns that some of the hardest hit towns and villages may never recover. And that's what they actually said about those previous earthquakes. Some of them, even 7 years ago, are still, roughly the same. I mean, they've rebuilt a little, but a lot of it, you can still see the scarring that has taken place.
Well, that's sad. Many of the buildings in these areas have not been updated to seismic standards. Many are just too old. Italy's prime minister has stated that it would be impossible to bring all of the ancient buildings in the country up to seismic code. In the general atmosphere of locals is fear, and some can't imagine staying, while others have vowed to rebuild.
Well, of course, the world is experiencing a remarkable increase in not just earthquakes, but environmental disasters as a whole. Larry McGee picks up for us on several other natural disasters, as well as a number of other interesting stories, ranging from the drug addiction that we mentioned in the beginning to the Euros. Larry, what do you have for us?
Abnormal water conditions are still plaguing the country, and the language being used to describe them now is record-breaking and historic. The latest round of floods, which struck the southern state of Louisiana, is reported to have taken the lives of at least 13 people and caused damage to tens of thousands of homes. The state's National Guard has been mobilized to provide temporary assistance to those citizens in need of supplies and are said to have distributed 4,000 meals and 7,000 bottles of water to flood victims. Residents report severe hardship locating water in the stores, and citizens of the area applying for federal assistance has now soared to over 100,000. The state's guard is also said to be providing emotional support for citizens who are broken with desperation, and the president is scheduled to visit soon to assess the damage and offer condolences. These days, if it isn't the water, then it's the air. In Indiana, tornadoes ravaged the city of Kokomo. Residents describe being huddled together in one establishment while watching violent winds completely destroy and collapse another. In all, as many as 15 tornadoes are reported to have battered the state, producing massive property damage and many shattered lives. The element of fire is also involved in the melee as well, as 6 large wildfires raged throughout California this week, commanding the attention of over 10,000 firefighters. Just east of Los Angeles, officials struggled to get a handle on a blaze that destroyed at least 300 buildings, 105 of which were reported to be single-family residences. Victims of the fire report their feelings of helplessness regarding the tragedy, and the damage assessment teams expect that the numbers related to the destruction will only climb. The destruction in the Euphrates region is still a matter of international concern as well. This week, the Russian flank of the quartet is calling on the UN to not draw hasty conclusions on the use of chemical weapons in Syria. This follows the establishment of an investigative team set up by the UN to look into alleged chemical attacks in the country. The big controversy continues to be who exactly is carrying out the attacks. The position of the West is that they are primarily the work of Damascus, while the Syrian government attributes the attacks to mercenaries. Amid it all, area doctors are calling August the deadliest month for the city of Aleppo, Syria's largest city, and an area of intense fighting between many different factions. On the question of chemical culpability, former CIA and State Department official Larry Johnson says that the Syrian government had a binary chemical weapon, but those weapons were collected and disposed of with the assistance of Russia, so those weapons have been taken off the battlefield. What the West does not want to acknowledge, he said, is the fact that we have enabled and in some cases directly supported groups in Syria which have carried out these chemical attacks and have used chlorine and other chemicals such as mustard gas as a pretext to put the onus or burden of it on the government of Bashar al-Assad. But in fact, the real culprits, the one who represent the real danger, he stated, and the international intelligence community knows this, are the rebels. There is danger lurking in many other places as well, as officials in several different states in the U.S. are said to be groping for answers to a recent surge in heroin overdoses. Authorities suspect that the cause are dealers who have begun lacing their products with an elephant tranquilizer. In all, 128 people are reported to have died in the latest surge, with 88 people alone overdosing in Ohio in a week. And in West Virginia, 27 people are reported to have overdosed in just 4 hours. Officials are reportedly receiving call volumes similar to that experienced during mass casualty events, and some people even took to social media trying to warn any would-be users of the danger. Medical experts say the problem is that people are switching back and forth between different opioids. If a person is trying pain pills, they say, and they can no longer get those, then they may switch to heroin. Iran and South Korea have agreed to switch their transactions to the euro to bypass U.S. sanctions and circumvent the petrodollar. Iran's deputy foreign minister gave a statement adding that other nations can also use euro for easier trade with Iranians. In July of last year, a nuclear arrangement between the P5 and Tehran resulted in the lifting of international sanctions on Iran. But despite that, the U.S. has continued its sanctions to prevent Iranian access to the U.S. dollar. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Interesting. I guess we'll see how this affects the global economy in regards to Tehran actually using the euro. Well, the UN reports that nearly 500,000 children in Chad, or Lake Chad, are suffering from malnutrition. Adrian Edwards, spokesman for UNHCR, said many of the displaced, from women, the children, and the elderly, they have very urgent needs, and pretty much wherever we're looking, of course, they're seeing so much devastation, so many problems. He says, we've seen adults so exhausted they aren't able to move, children with swollen faces and hollow eyes and other clear indications of acute malnutrition.
The UN has also warned that over 49,000 of those children are at immediate risk and will die this year if they do not receive treatment immediately. Now, the crisis has been blamed on severe drought and attacks by the terrorist group Boko Haram. Lake Chad borders Nigeria and Chad.
Well, children and the sufferings as a result of war, along with the pictures that accompany them and their stories, have become highly symbolic. But not all get the same attention. The image of a Syrian boy who survived an airstrike in Aleppo touched the hearts of millions and millions of people, and it gave attention from around the world to the conflicts and sufferings going on in Syria. 5-year-old Omran Daknesh is a boy who's come to symbolize the plight of the country.
Many reporters spoke about the image and even shed a tear over the look of shock that was displayed upon the face of the child, saying, it's heartbreaking, it's almost like the boy is asking us to do something. It just gets you right here, it's so disturbing, among other comments that were made. And all of them were sympathizing with the little one's image of suffering.
That's right. But there are many other images that didn't go viral, but also show the reality of this war. About a month ago, a video was posted of an 11-year-old boy who was beheaded. Many found the footage too graphic to watch. That video wasn't as widely publicized, but it did cause outrage around the world. A week ago, Saudi Arabia bombed a school in Yemen, killing 10 children and wounding 28, and the world hardly noticed. Well, take a look at some of the other images of the suffering of children in this area, video courtesy of RT.
Well, certainly a terrible situation.
That's right.
Well, Germany is telling its citizens to stockpile food and water in case of a catastrophe. Now, they've said that the people should have enough for 10 days as a precautionary measure in the event of any large-scale attack. Now, the move is part of a new defense strategy that the government is thinking through. According to a leak from the German government, for the first time since the Cold War, the government is urging its citizens to prepare for a response to the threat of war.
They're saying that citizens need to stockpile 10 days worth of food, 5 days worth of drinking water, and other supplies, along with medicine. This is so that they can wait it out for a period of time until the government can help. They said that the population should be able to protect themselves before government measures to ensure an adequate supply of food, water, energy, and cash.
Well, the report did not specify what type of catastrophe or attack the government wanted the people to prepare for. Introducing new security measures is not new in Germany following the recent run of attacks in Europe. Now, over the past month alone, 2 of those attacks have been directly linked to Islamic extremism. Now, citizens of Berlin agree with the measures, saying, "We're living in a time where uncertainty is increasing, and for that reason, yes, the people become nervous." And I imagine the government, if they can have their people prepare, then it just lessens the burden on them in the event there is a large-scale attack. At least they're hoping their people are taken care of.
Sure, but the people don't know what's going on, so it's got them kind of on
right.
edge. Some even said if the government says that you need to buy much water and food, it must be a very serious thing. Others said that they were kind of scared because they thought that there must be something going on, while others tried to be optimistic, saying fear is a subjective feeling and that there are a lot of things happening in Germany, so I guess you should keep in mind what you have in your fridge or basement. We've done that before.
Well, a bomb attack in southeastern Turkey has killed 30 and wounded many more. Now, the bomb targeted a wedding party, and the president of Turkey, Erdogan, said Daesh terrorist group is the likely perpetrator of the terror attack. Well, so far, no other group has claimed responsibility. Now, the country has been rocked by several terror attacks over the past few months, with 2 attacks occurring recently, striking the city of Van and the town of Bitlis, both in Turkey's troubled southeast part.
The bomber who struck was between age 12 and 14 years old. That's right, very young. That, according to Turkish President Erdogan, he revealed the bomber's age during a press conference on Sunday. That blast striking a wedding party injured 69 people, with 16 of those injured seriously. The funeral ceremony for those killed turned into an anti-government demonstration, with many mourners being angry with the Turkish president.
Well, in case you missed it in our last broadcast, take a look as we'll show you again the footage from the International Space Station as it was orbiting the Earth when one of its cameras on a live feed was pointed at the Earth, caught an interesting golden square-shaped object. And it's just kind of hovering there. You'll see it in a minute here. You'll see it hovering above the Earth before the footage was actually suddenly disrupted. So we'll take a look at this video. Still no answers to what that strange object might be.
But it definitely is very interesting. Well, bugs spreading viruses, earthquakes in place after place, severe weather, starvation, war, terror, death, and suffering. It seems as though mankind is reaching a breaking point and something is going to give way very soon. Many are searching for answers, but coming up empty-handed. Yisrael Hawkins has the answers you've been looking for. Contact the House of Yahweh to find out the true light at the end of the tunnel. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copies of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
Well, to contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, or www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com, and any email, you can email them at info@yahweh.com. Don't forget any international calls. You can call the number on your screen. And once again, we'd like to remind you of the Yisrael Says program that you can find and learn more about by going to www.yisraelsays.com, and you'll be very delighted on how helpful this Bible study tool is and how easy it is to search for the answers that you've been looking for many years concerning the Scriptures.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, the man who has the answers, Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrael Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Come on, cheer up. Come on. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. If I could have your undivided attention today, you're going to feel really, really joyous when we get to the end of this sermon. What we were talking about last week, of course, was got to find that here it is, last Sabbath, that I hope you remember, among all the chaos of the world news, and it's getting worse, and now they're adding sprays to it to make it worse. The sons of Yahweh, the first group to invade the earth, so to speak. These people were not unlearned, ignorant children. They in fact, the Scripture shows that they held rather high offices, about as high as office that you could hold outside of Yahweh's office of Creator Himself. He didn't give them that. They could create and maintain flesh, and that was it. And then they lost that when they rebelled. But they were high-ranking individuals that trespassed on earth. I guess the most letters that came, questions, how do we know they trespassed? Well, the earth was given to man. That's how we know it, what they trespassed. It wasn't given to the heavenly beings. In a scripture, I've got to straighten this scripture out. I'll read it to you this morning. Kohan Yehuda will probably add more to this during the feast, but Yalkanan 1:1. In the beginning was the plan of Yahweh, and the plan was with Yahweh, and the plan was Yahweh. I won't read you all the words, but the way this should be written the way that it's properly translated, in the beginning at Abel. In the beginning at Abel was the plan of Yahweh. And this plan at Abel was with Yahweh, and this plan will come to pass at Abel. Now, if you would add Revelations 10:7 to that, you'll see that it's coming to pass right now. The praise Yahweh, and it will never change. And of course, I'll show you how the sons of Yahweh they proved themselves unacceptable, is what they did. The house of Yahweh that Yahweh has established at this time, I wanted to show you this. I know nothing about computers. I know nothing about this Alps thing except what some have explained to me. But it's there's a rating. They put out a rating, and that rating is done by the people, not the system. It's actually how the people read the articles, the news articles, and they rate these news articles. The highest rating you can get is 5. That's as high as it goes. No one has reached that yet. If you're checking it out, there's a lot of people that try to falsify it and put things on it, but it's quickly taken off. They're trying to keep it true and correct, so you can believe what they say. But this rating that they have, that the people write in and rate the news articles as they read them or comment on it somewhere online or something. 5 is the highest number, and we are pretty close to that. If I can get that. Can you see that? That is 4.9. 4.9. We're the highest on Alps right now of any news articles that's put out. Here's another one. It's just a different company, but they show the same thing. 4.9 for the house of Yahweh. This is the house of Yahweh, not the fake house of Yahweh that's out there. And you know there's a lot of fake house of Yahwehs out there. How do I know they're fake? They're not according to prophecy. They're not fulfilling the prophecies. They weren't established according to prophecy. This week, we had a big jump in to start off with. Normally, it's about 45 to 55,000 newspapers and news medias that read and enter our news articles. But the name of this one this week, Yisrael Hawkins explains why the house of Yahweh should be a household name. We had a big jump forward of 70,848 news medias that wanted that. On the Google rating, you'll see we're at the top. Then there's 2 in between, and then we're in it again. We're in the same page twice here, with some unauthorized, uneducated in between there of what's going on in the world today. The others are climbing, but this one has got me excited now because of that huge number to start off with, where it normally starts off about 20,000 less than that. The Zika infection, there's already people saying that you know, there's something not right about this whole thing, and that the spray is worse than the Zika virus, and why they're asking questions. Why are they only spraying this in certain portions of the city? Why aren't they spraying the whole city? Is it a test, or do they know what's going to take place? Well, you saw on the news, it's the news is leaking out that it's a bad thing what they're doing, bad to the health of the people. They're also spraying Abelin, and of course, I can tell you again, this is the protected place. This is. And you need to put your trust in Yahweh fully, because the world around us is going to get much worse very fast now. The real infectious disease problem isn't Zika. He says it's syphilis. And this has shown how it's getting into the newborn babies. They're born with it. The newborn babies is defected, of course, even their brains, with syphilis. Gays and bisexual men, they call it, make up 90% of syphilis cases. But still they won't repent. Don't preach to them that it's wrong, because the Pope says, because that would take away their rights. And their rights are, now get this, I want you to start understanding this now. Their rights, that they're claiming rights, is to follow the original sons of Yahweh, to follow them. They are gods, they're still high in power. The way the scripture reads, they're like put in a dungeon or a cell or, prison, but that's not the case. They're just limited to where they can go and what they can do, but they're fully alive and well, and they're working with Satan right now. But this is what we're fighting, and as I will show you as this goes on, these original sons of Yahweh that brought the earth to a troublesome mess, as bad as it was in the days of Noah. And of course, Yahweh, he didn't give them permission to go to the earth, but they went, and he didn't stop them. Well, of course, that's what the Pope says. That's what the Vatican says. Well, we had permission, the very fact that we could change the Sabbath day from the seventh day of the week to the first day of the week, and miss our appointment with Yahweh by one day, shows that since Yahweh didn't kill us, that He has given us permission to do so. The warning issued by the National Science Week is the disease that's hitting the babies. The fact that the iniquity has increased in this time period, this generation, as Yeshua shows us in Matthew 24, verse 11 and 12, false prophets bringing forth iniquity is what has caused love to disappear. There's no love for our children. There's no love for these infants that are dying from these diseases. It makes you sick to see it, but there's a dangerous flu-like symptoms in their young children. The cases are enormous. In 2015, it's spreading drastically, and of course, they're going to blame something else. They're not going to blame their own sins, but Yahweh shows it's their sins that's causing this. Another headache that the world is living with right now, if you see that picture, it kind of shows the depression on the woman's face. This is a young girl. And the depression, now this is between the years of 15 and when a time period when you should be learning why you're here, why you're actually witnessing all this to begin with. Yahweh created you and just gave you a certain time period to live. And of course, death ends it. But in that time period, there wasn't any salvation offered for certain time periods. So those people were never judged. But they lived through it and died in it. But the time period that he prophesies, and prophesies where it will come from, is this generation right here, when the seventh Malach speaks, as his Revelations 10:7 shows. But the young people especially, it's in the older ones too. It's in almost all over the world right now, as the newspaper articles show. But they get so depressed because they can't see any future. They're being taken advantage of by young men who are being taught to do this by their families, by their fathers. I know this for a fact. In dealing in my past, I was dealing with the world and trying to preach to everyone, and of course, a little at a time, I finally went into it full force, and that's when the persecution started. But the people they're seeing they have no future, and of course the colleges are saying, come to college and we'll give you a job. But the jobs, and looking at the jobs, it's kind of like playing the this thing where you lottery. The odds are actually against anyone winning. It's same thing with the world. There's really no future in these colleges at all. The colleges know that they're fixing to go down. The banks know that they're fixing to go down. And there are warnings going out right now to these people. And of course, these young people who have their whole life ahead of them, they got several diseases already, some in their heart, some in their brain. So they know they got a bleak future to begin with. But then the last lover just left them. Lover, that's a joke, of course. There's no love in it. The last luster just left them. So they're very depressed with their lives. Their whole life, they're finally seeing what Satan, what the sons, and I'm going to harp on this a lot now because I started to bring this years ago. And I said, nobody's going to believe that. Well, I think it's different now. I think maybe you're up to it. But anyway, I'm going to bring it. Disturbing series of events governments around the world seem to be preparing for. Now this is not just here in Abelin, but it's global, and it's in every nation. Of course, some of the nations now are so war-torn, they can't make plans for anything. I mean, it's gone. The wars that you saw taking place in Syria, we spoke of those wars in the book and how they would begin, how they'd be held back until you could grow to a certain point, and then they're going to be turned loose. And now they see what Caspar Weinberger put in his book, The Next War. The people are seeing this. The government leaders are seeing this. Well, the governments are putting out warnings now to their people. How a couple of days ago the German government advised its citizens to start stockpiling food and water. The government of Germany. Now, of course, they're stockpiling. They're saying, let's get a week or two ahead here. Well, a week or two ahead is not going to help. That's, it's like having a gallon of water to last you a year. With the way we waste water, it wouldn't last you 10 minutes, I think. You might start trying to live, too. Think about when you're running that water from the faucet. Think about how I lived, how I was brought up to live, which I've told you about it. I think we're going to set up demonstrations this feast. If we have time, we'll set up demonstrations at the peaceful scene and show you, how much water we had per day that everyone bathed in. And we'll have a tub there with that supply of water. It wasn't very much. You had to reach down deep in the tub, to get your rag wet. No, we didn't lay back in the tub and soak back then. Didn't let the shower run over us either. But that would be a great way to start with, because we are going to have a huge influx of people. I'm perceiving that this is the way we're going to live, the way I lived when I was brought up to live. Everybody did up until that time. Until this time period, everyone lived that way. Abraham lived from a water well. Israel Hawkins lived from a water well. Drawing it one end at a time. Germany isn't alone. There are increasing hints in countries around the world that something big is on its way, and it won't be pretty. That's the story that's coming from the governments around the world. Germany may reintroduce a form of national service for civilians to help the army deal with a future disaster. Now, they're doing the same thing here, and we told you about it not too long ago. Some of the intelligence in Washington had people here, and they invited them to Washington to tell them about an enlistment program for civilians to help in this time of crisis, because it is going to be a crisis, and a week's supply of food will only get you 1 week. And this is going to be much longer than that. Starvation is going to set in. That's when you'll have people fighting for food and probably water, because the cities, computers, banks, and so forth is going to be shut down. And that's what the governments are warning them about and telling them, get you a week's supply of food and water. 1 week. It's almost a laugh, It's kind of like taking the Zika virus and spraying a chemical that's worse than the Zika virus. Isaiah 59 said there'd be groping in the dark for an answer, but of course there is no answers in the world. The house of Yahweh is the only one on earth that has an answer to these problems. And of course we're getting this out. And there's a lot of preachers that's changing their names to House of Yahweh. Maybe they'll go ahead and convert. But there's only one place promised that's going to be protected. Now get this right here. The role of civilians is part of a new civil defense strategy to be discussed by the government on Wednesday. Since the strategy was leaked to the media, there has been intense debate about stockpiling food and water. In a crisis, civilians might be obliged to help direct traffic, provide fuel, accommodations for the military. Well, that's just some of the things that the people in the world are going to be facing. The German government is urging citizens to get prepared quickly. Now, I know these governments have secret plans. The Vatican has secret plans. Malachi Martin, in his book, The Keys of This Blood, shows how it can get turned around quickly by just one nation, saying Russia could turn to a grizzly overnight. Russia has turned to the grizzly. So, and China has joined them, and there's many other nations now that are turning their heads to see what else might be offered besides the petrodollar and the destruction that goes with it. The German Federal Office of Civil Protection and Disaster Assistance put the following list on their website as a guide. 28 liters, that's 6 gallons, 6.2 gallons, 1 bucket of drinking water. 4.9 Kellogg's, 10.8 ounce, 10.8 pounds of bread, noodles, rice, potatoes. 12.3 pounds of vegetables, and preferably pre-cooked. 8 pounds of fruit and nuts in jars or tins. A survival list that should last an individual for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We've got accustomed, he says, to not least because of the internet, to have everything available at all times. Now that's what the people do. They're living from the store. A lot of people go shopping every week. Some of them go every month. Some of them have quit going. In addition to the food list, he suggested medicines, a flashlight, spare batteries, and candles. The American government has also issued recent warnings. President Obama now, I don't know if y'all got this or not, but it was played here. He says it is every citizen's responsibility to prepare for disaster. And he was urging it to be done. The hints are everywhere that war could be on the horizon. War. This article, I don't know if you remember it or not, but read this first. Prophecies you will soon see, then you will believe. And you need to get this and read it. In the this is a news article. The last week now, we saw I talked about it. I didn't really get into it. There's so much on it that you're going to have to try not to miss a word, and you'll be glad you did, because when you see this unfolding the way Yahweh has got it, here a little and there a little, it is very fascinating to see what the original sons of Yahweh did, what they're doing today. They're still alive and well. They have eternal bodies that would actually live forever if they would just do certain things. Anyway, the fruits of the first sons of Yahweh were totally unacceptable. If you'll turn to Ephesians with me, Ephesians 3, and look at verse 9 here first. Verse 9. Ephesians, found on 917, page 917. Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 9. To make, we got all men plainly see, to make you see. That's all that Yahweh wants right now, is to make the ones he's calling see, because he's not calling everyone on earth. He's already lined out in number and scripture and so forth those he's calling. He's called you or you wouldn't be here, and you have a chance of being his eternal sons. These sons of, some of them were of Hillel, and of course they're spoken of as her children in the Holy Scriptures, as her children that she bore. But this is to make you see how this secret is administrated, which has been hidden in Yahweh from the beginning. Now that'll mean something different to you now with this subject. In the beginning, Yahweh created the heavens and the earth became. And there was a time period that Yahweh knew they were trespassing, and He allowed it. He knows that these same ones are trespassing today, and Yahweh is allowing it because He's showing what their way it will bring them. And he prophesies what their way will bring them. But from the beginning of the ages, that is, the end of the ages here, so you will see in the end, this is the same word that's used by Yeshua, and the King James Version translated it the end, and it's actually the ages, the specified, prophesied ages and division of ages that I'm hoping you're seeing in this work that I'm having the great Kohan Benjamin Krause Hawkins bring out with the numbers. That's really fascinating, and you really need to study it along with the prophecy. It doesn't mean much without the prophecy, but with the prophecies, and you see this. Look at that again. To make you understand how this secret is administrated, which has been hidden. It's been hidden. We're the only ones that's been allowed to bring this out. No one before us. Now, some of the disciples, we get bits and pieces of it in the prophet's work, and I'll tell you things to look for in this, but there was an allotted time that Yahweh allowed His original sons to trespass on earth. And that allotted time is what I was telling you about, because it shows us when the earth was created. It's beautiful. If you'll just pay attention, you'll get it, but it does take some work. It's not an easy subject, probably one of the hardest. But this secret is administrated. It's being brought forth by Yahweh secretly, and no one has ever caught this. No one's ever understood it until this time period when His house is actually assigned by prophecy to bring it about, to bring it to light. And that's what we're doing with each newsletter. That's the reason I beg you to read these newsletters, the prophetic word and the newsletters that I write every week. I'm trying to get it increased now to where we can put these out twice a week to the papers instead of just once a week. But you really need to read those, every one of them. I know they're long. I'm the one that wrote them. But I know you can read them faster than I can write them. In this writing, it takes a long time because I have to stop and do research. And of course, I can have other people help me in doing a certain research. But in the scriptures, I'm pretty well bound myself to doing that. And I can have the researchers, bring me articles of this and that and the other that I use in it. But that the research in the scriptures that I'm going to tie together for you in a neat package so you can understand this, that's all has to be done by me. I can't find any other way out. Plus, now you haven't heard it ringing, but plus, every 3 to 5 minutes, okay. And while I'm answering that call, 3 or 4 more comes in. Depending on, I'm not telling you to stop. I love it. I'm taking care of it. I'll do my job, okay? And it goes on late of the night, but it does interrupt. But get that. To make you understand. To make you, not men, but you, in this particular time period that he's speaking of. When the house of Yahweh was established. That's the time period he's talking about right here. You who are sitting here and those hearing me. Those who can hear have an opportunity at salvation right now. It is being offered right now, but it's only being offered from one place, and you got to keep your appointment with Yahweh or you won't be in that place. You won't be at his house. Blessed is the one that latches on to the Sabbath day. That's in Isaiah. Isaiah, he says, blessed is the man that latches on to the Sabbath day and does not pollute it. Don't change it. Do it the way that it's written. We're the only ones on earth that's doing it. And these quacks that's calling themselves House of Yahweh, or after Yahweh's name, but won't turn from sin, one of their sins is they're not keeping the Sabbath in the place that Yahweh chooses to place his name in prophecy. He will have no other work. No, Moshe said, Moshe 3:9, I'll have no other work other than that prophesied by the prophets, by Yahweh's prophets. Not Baal's prophets, but Yahweh's prophets. And Yahweh saw to it that it's written for us. He who reads, let him understand this, he said. But to make you see how this secret is administrated, which has been hidden in Yahweh from the beginning. The beginning was not when he created mankind. He had the plan with him in the beginning to create mankind. Let me see if David has that one ready for me. In the beginning. Yes, in the beginning at Abel was the plan of Yahweh, and this plan at Abel was with Yahweh, just like, and this is to make you see that, make you understand this, how this administration is being carried forward that was actually prophesied, and this plan will come to pass at Abel. And that is so beautiful, that prophecy right there. Okay, now, with that in your mind, you should be able to see what he's saying. And to make you understand, in this time period, that the ends of the age now, the ages, the prophesied ages, which Yeshua said is this generation that we're in, that's you sitting here right now. They didn't understand this back in Shaul's day. Shaul didn't understand it either, but he was inspired to write it, which was hidden in Yahweh from the beginning of the ages, who created all things. Who created all things. Look at verse 10. For this purpose, that it might now be made known to the principalities and powers. Where? You see that? Where are we making this known? We're making this known in heaven. In heaven. Through the called out ones, the prophesied ones is what he's talking about, where he chooses to place his name, who don't miss it by one day. No, we keep our appointments on the day that Yahweh said we to be there. The manifold wisdom of Yahweh. I'm telling you, in these numbers and things that are being brought out, and I just, you just can't imagine a being that could look down in the future. Yes, Abel was in his plan in the beginning, and then there was allotted time that Yahweh knew that his original sons, Hillel's sons, who were priests in heaven, who were judges, they held the offices of high administrators in heaven. And Yahweh sat among them, he said. Yes, I'll show you that, where Yahweh actually sat in their midst and told them, this is what you should do. But of course, they didn't do it. Remember where the sons of Yahweh, if this will enforce it any, Remember in Eob where there was a day when the sons of Yahweh presented themselves to Yahweh in front of his throne? Remember that? Now, if you'll tie it into this right here, these are the sons of Yahweh in heaven, many of which had their powers taken away from them. That is, they took it away from themselves, and Yahweh is not going to replace it because they are not the ones for this job. Yahweh had a plan, even back before that, how he was going to solve this problem with you sitting right here. You got the highest position offered to you that's ever been offered to any beings, including the sons of Yahweh, the original sons of Yahweh. With this manifold wisdom of Yahweh, and this is what you're seeing now when you see these prophecies unfold and you see these numbers and you see something that we have done and you look at the numbers and there and behold, it's telling you that's the day you were going to do this. And you just nearly flip. You think what a brilliant being this is who owes nobody anything. Yahweh don't owe you anything. You don't owe anybody anything. He's the creator. He owes nothing. But yet he has took it on himself to be a slave for his creation and to guide their every minute, every thought, everything, furnish everything they need in full control to protect you and your house. The house of Yahweh better be your house. Okay, plan from the ages, verse 11. All according to the plan of the ages, that is, the different time periods, this time period, the last generation, which he carried into effect in anointing Yeshua. Now that should bring a bunch of scriptures to your mind. Hebrews 10:16. 10:16. Isn't that right? Is that right? Shake your head. No, it's 10:21. Come on. 10:21. 10:16 now is the one where it shows you what he's teaching in this time period when he is high priest over the house of Yahweh. He wasn't high priest when he was here on earth before. He had 12 disciples. He was a school teacher. And he taught the scriptures to Yahweh, the Yahweh scriptures that was written by Yahweh's prophets. He taught them to his 12 disciples. He also taught in the temple daily. He taught there daily. When he was among them, he taught these scriptures. But it seemed like that the ones, there was a lot of them came and they said, this is truth. And they carried this then afterwards and suffered persecution and death, of course. But they did pick up what Yeshua taught, and it changed the world big time. And of course, from that, of course, comes our generation right here with a family in Oklahoma working with little things, and Yahweh given every detail of our life to show how the work began. But these things were carried with him and carried out, if you can see what he's saying here. Carried out by Yahweh. All according to the plan of the ages, which he carried into effect in anointing Yeshua as high priest in these last days. Hebrews 10:21. He is high priest over the house of Yahweh. If you look over one more to Ephesians 6 now, I'm just getting things in your mind that you're going to need later on when, and as you see this, too, you'll start in your studies. You'll start seeing this in your studies, what I'm telling you now. and the time periods that he set. Yes, he sets them in advance, and but in the beginning now was the plan. Now it was allowed to be held back, of course, and let the sons of Yahweh who presented themselves in the days of Eob, it was held back just so they could do their thing on earth and prove themselves. So the same reason why you can do your thing right here, the bread sack this morning, it said, I am so glad. I'm going to get this wrong, I know, but you can read it later in the bread sack. I'm so glad to become a humble donkey, willingly doing my job, and not being like well, it slipped my mind. If anyone can hear me, bring me that bread sack. It's on my table. Oh, I know, it came to me. I'm a humble donkey doing my job, rejoicing in doing my job, instead of being a smart ass. Now that's going to go in a prophetic word, so, and we're not going to change it. But here in Ephesians 6 now, and let's look at verse 10. Ephesians 6 and verse 10. Finally, my brothers, strengthen yourselves in Yahweh and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to stand against the walls of, that's the craftiness and schemes of Satan. She does have schemes in your life, and she'll set them up for you. She lays traps all the time, and that's what he's talking about here. For we wrestle. Now here, I want you to get this verse right here. Get this verse, you've got to. For we wrestle not only against flesh and blood, but also against principalities. This principalities that is talking about here, I've never brought it out, but this is the sons of Yahweh, who in Eob was shown as presenting themselves on a certain day in front of Yahweh. And Satan came in the midst of her children. So understand that, and let's read again. For we wrestle not only against flesh and blood. We're wrestling against our own lust, our flesh and blood, yes. But also against these principalities that has the power of influence. Against powers, against the rulers of darkness. Well, of course, if you remember, if Yahweh did not spare, this is in Yada 6, if Yahweh didn't spare, don't turn over there yet, we're not through here, we'll get it later. I'll quote it to you, what I want you to get. If Yahweh spared not the Malachim, that's the sons of Yahweh, some by Hillel, if he spared them not, they were his own sons. What does that tell you when a son leaves the house of Yahweh? Or a daughter? If he spared not, would you? Well, you're not being like Yahweh if you do. And you would probably creep that mess in that would start the same thing that we showed you in the news and showed you in the articles and been showing you now for years that it's caused. And it would slowly turn to sick babies, born half dead, Zika diseases, syphilis, all kinds of sexually transmitted diseases. That's what one person can do. Just one. Cain brought about this one thing, and Yahweh allowed him to do it to show you that if we let one little thing creep in and change his way, keep the Sabbath without polluting it. Don't let these things creep in anywhere. Okay, read again now, verse 12. We wrestle not only against flesh and blood, but also against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness. Yes, they're chained in darkness. They're not going any further with the house of Yahweh. They're still active in their own realm, but they're not allowed to touch you. They're not allowed to take you out of the house. You've got to make that choice yourself. And once you make it, you've made it, you've chose it. You can't turn around and do it over. You better hang on to what you got and get stronger. That's what you better do. Yes, I spared not my own sons too. They left me, and I said, if you leave me, there's no coming back. You realize that. I said, I'll take care of you. I will spit shine your shoes. I'll do anything I can to help you. But if you leave Yahweh, you're gone. Well, these people were sons of Yahweh. These were the original sons of Yahweh, his children. How can I make it any clearer? And no, he didn't spare them. And no, he won't allow them into his kingdom. They have proved totally unacceptable for his kingdom. And you could do the same thing yourself, or your child could do it. Don't stand up for him if he does. Don't stand up for her if she does. Be like Yahweh. One little bit of sin will start turning this thing, a perfect kingdom, around. It's not going to be in the new world. That's where righteousness is going to dwell, and you can bet your boots on that. So, let's see, we're in verse 12. Against principalities, powers, against the rulers of darkness, as Yada 6 says, chained in darkness. They're not in jail. They're not. They're enjoying their sinful lives and disrupting many parts of the world right now. In fact, we're dealing with what they're doing with the Vatican right now. They're in full control, and they have control. When the Vatican chose to worship gods, that's the gods that we're speaking of, the original sons of Yahweh. They made themselves gods. Darkness, that is, Satan made them gods and says, come and worship them, be like the God. Does that make sense now? Yahweh says, don't follow them, don't do what they say, don't touch of that tree, else you will die. Dying, you will die. It will start bringing sin, which kills, into you, as it did to them. They won't live forever. No, they're killing themselves. Satan is going to die too. It's just a lot slower than mankind. I showed you where Satan, I don't know if we got that sermon. You could probably, we've got people that could probably find it in 2 seconds on the Yisrael Says program. But where Satan is going to find rest. Well, that means death. The rulers of darkness, we're dealing with these rulers of darkness right now, fighting with them of the world against spiritual forces of the evil one. Do you see that? Evil, be evil like the gods. Genesis 5. There you go. Genesis 3. 3:5. Spiritual forces of the evil one in the heavens. Therefore, take up the whole armor Where do we want to go? On. We want to go on. I'll try to finish this and we'll quit. Therefore, take up the whole armor of Yahweh, that you may be able to withstand. This armor of Yahweh, you're looking at it right now. It's the Book of Yahweh. And the more you know about it, the less likely you are to be deceived. Evil day. Withstand in the evil day. That's the day where the gods have it all at their full force, and where they're going to destroy themselves and destroy the earth and mankind with few men left. That's that evil day of the gods. And having overcome all, to stand. Stand therefore, having your waist belted with the truth, the laws of Yahweh, having put on the breastplate of righteousness. Righteousness, that's a word that they wanted to take out, but they couldn't do it. And having shod your feet with the preparation of the message of peace, peaceful solution, the peaceful solution, to practice the peaceful solution. Don't be that smart ass that goes around causing trouble. That was the sons of Yahweh, who are high executives. They're the highest ranking of all in heaven. Above all, taking the shield of the faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, that's the laws of Yahweh, which is the word of Yahweh, the laws and the prophecies. Pray always, verse 19, get this, and pray pray on my behalf also, that utterance may be given to me at the opening of my mouth, to boldly make known this great secret of the message. And when it's going to be revealed, I was hoping to cover, to get a little further here, but my time is up. Now, I'll be back with you next week, Yahweh willing. But if you'll just keep in mind these things, don't let them slip from your mind. Everything that was brought, read this right here. Read this first. Prophecies you will soon see, then you will believe. Where's the nuclear baby? Where's the nuclear baby? That nuclear baby now has articles that go with it showing the date. If you remember, I put it, Yahweh gave us the date that this was actually going to take place, and we printed it, and then we saw in Syria, we saw the nuclear strike, that is a strike against the nuclear plant in Syria, right on the edge of the great river Euphrates, and then there was the war was declared, and nuclear bombs were loaded, and one general single-handedly, the article said, stopped the war. Well, of course, it wasn't him that stopped it. It was Yahweh that stopped it. For you, by the way, so that he could finish you out and get you out to where you wouldn't turn back as his sons did, as his original sons did, and as all the world has gone following Cain. They're following the gods. Cain followed the gods. Abel followed Yahweh. Yahweh allowed him a certain time period to show what sin would bring on the earth. He allowed him a certain time period. And then he showed that. He showed how the earth would actually flood itself to get rid of them. And he took Noah through this, Noah and his family, and then he had a plan that was finishing in the number that Adele brought this morning. One of our young deacons brought this morning. That's beautiful. You need to study that. That's a great lesson right there. And then the eating of the clean and unclean food. It starts with that, as the great white buffalo deacon brought out. It starts with that, and then it builds in the mind to where you don't have any answers for the problem. So either you turn to violence and try to wipe out all the enemies, or you could repent, keep your appointment with Yahweh, and He'll show you the only way out. Now, His sons, they could have had it. They could have been. But He knew they wouldn't. And He knew that there's a special training that has to go into everyone He chooses. And they have to be tested. And they have to have supervisors to say, this is the way. Walk you in it. Now, that's me right now, but each one of you are going to do that one day. And then your children and your children's children, they'll never depart from this. Once this government is instituted, they'll never depart from it. If someone even thought about it, it'll flash in their mind all the hell that's going on this earth today. And all the fighting. Isn't it strange that this fighting is going on in and around the great river Euphrates, and these people are being killed, slaughtered, and I don't know that we're having trouble finding numbers to show the number and the percentage, but a third of those people are going to die around in that fourth part of the earth now, and that's exactly where the wars are taking place right now, and all the bombings taking place in that fourth part of the earth, just like Yahweh said. Thousands of years ago He said it. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next lady. I love you!